Alrighty, is that good water? I'm just kidding. Awesome. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of CX on Point with Miguel Ramos. My friend, how are you?
I am doing well, Alicia. Thanks.
We're excited about this episode. We've got Kyle McDowell here. And this is probably the first episode that we had to do a lot of homework. I'm super excited that we did. This book is fantastic. And so I'll let you introduce Kyle. I'm super excited about this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, Kyle, once again on the book. Absolutely amazing. Really looking forward to our conversation today and learning a bit more about the book. But actually, Kyle, I just wanted to start. I know you're on the west coast of Florida. And obviously, we recently had Hurricane Ian. Were you affected at all? Everything okay with you guys on the West Coast?
Miguel, first of all, thank you for having me. Alicia, great to see you as well. If I had some, I got to tell you, knock on wood, Tampa has been very, very fortunate. We've avoided a direct strike for nearly 100 years now. And, the last two major hurricanes that made their way through the Gulf to West Central Florida were we were right in the center, the projected path. We were right in the center. And at the last minute at both of these storms, they just veered away, and I didn't even flicker power. But I got to be honest, it's hard to be too celebratory when you see the video and hear the stories that are coming out of, just an hour and a half from here. Some really, really some bad scenes coming out of there. And my heart goes out to those folks. So while we were spared here, it's hard to celebrate too much, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we were scheduled to be in Sanibel for a charity event that week. And, Sanibel went through some devastating, challenges as a post-hurricane there. And in fact, a big part of the hotel that we're going to be staying at was completely flattened. So
wow.
Our hearts go out to them as well.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, again, thanks for joining us today, and I'm really excited about the conversation. You've had an amazing career in the customer experience world, which is really where we focus and we do a lot of our work today. Love for you to tell us a little bit about sort of the journey and where you started and what led you to writing Begin With We.
Sure. So I am fresh off of a 29-year career in corporate America, where throughout that period, I found myself in bigger and bigger roles over time. But I'm really proud of those humble beginnings, man. I started off in a cubicle with a headset on at a call center for a regional bank here in Tampa. And, with a lot of determination, I was able to slowly kind of matriculate through corporate America, take on bigger and bigger roles. And, there was a theme to every single one of those roles, and that was service. So I ran big service operations, lots of call centers in the several thousand seat arena. And, as I found myself working my way through corporate America, I realized that every single thing that I do as it relates to being a leader is about people. And whether that's the call center world, whether it's the enrollment functions that I've run, running the world's largest mail order pharmacy for a period of time, it doesn't matter. It's all people. So my experience taught me very, very early on that the key to success, and not only as a contributor, individual contributors, but obviously more importantly as a leader of people, is understanding the value that those people, the team, brings to the organization. So, most recently, Miguel, I was fortunate enough to lead a big operation for a very large pharmaceutical company, where I had a $2 billion budget, 15,000 employees across 40 plus locations. And, I'll tell you, my focus in that role was no different than my focus when I was a young leader of just a handful of people. And that is, again, the focus on those people. But it's been a good journey. I'm a very lucky guy. I think anyone that's got a career or has had a career, in any way that they would deem a success, or at least have had an impact, it's got to be a little bit of luck. So I do consider myself a lucky fellow.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I've had the opportunity to work with you in several of those different functions. And I'll echo the fact that I too started with humble beginnings. Mine were a little more humble, I think, than yours. I was a call center agent for Taco Bell. So
wow.
definitely a bit of a difference, but really enjoyed it. Kyle, as you've gone through your career and got to the point of writing the book, was there something specific in your career that led to that day in Lawrence, Kansas, where you sat down and I would say put pen to paper, but I think you did it on a computer at that point.
I did, yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'm sure similar to you in that Taco Bell experience, Miguel. When I joined the workforce, by the way, I should share a very quick story. When I interviewed for that role as a call center rep for this regional bank, I was 17 years old. And I rolled the dice that by the time the offer would come, should I be so lucky to get an offer, I would have turned 18 and they could hire me. Well, it worked out. So I started that role at the ripe age of 18. And I entered the workforce with a very strong sense of optimism. And I was what they would call, or probably still describe in some ways, as an eager beaver. Like I was the guy that showed up with a giant smile, ready to work my ass off, at every turn to give myself more opportunities to take on something bigger and bigger. But that eagerness and that optimism and excitement over time, and I mean, dozens plus years, I found myself that those feelings became very fleeting. And, frankly, found myself kind of disenfranchised in some ways, kind of apathetic towards the corporate environments that I was a part of. And that was a result of many things, but mostly what I would describe as inauthentic leaders, people that were more focused on themselves and the credibility and success of their brand, their personal brand, versus investing their time and energy into the team. And in many cases, I just felt like there was more to leading and there was more to being led. So I told myself, if I was ever given the opportunity to lead an organization that would afford me the autonomy to really drive a cultural transformation and do it the way that I thought would really resonate with my team, I was going to do it. And I was going to do it very differently than the way I had seen in the previous 20 plus years. Well, be careful what you wish for, because in 2016, I took on a role where I was, really, really, really thrilled to have the opportunity to lead 13,000 customer service professionals that are responsible for processing the Affordable Care Act, telephonic enrollments, as well as enrollments for 1-800 Medicare. Huge program, enormous mission, lots of purpose. But when I joined the organization, I was made aware very early on that there were some cultural challenges, and some folks would even describe it a little toxic. The predecessor that I was there to replace had developed a reputation of kind of a me first orientation. The functional departments that reported to me were largely siloed. They cared about one another, but they didn't care about one another enough to recognize the value of the team versus my individual functions success. So I would coin that silo success. If one group is performing well, fantastic. But if other groups are not, collectively, we are not performing well. Well, so when this opportunity presented itself, and you referenced in Lawrence, Kansas, I had the opportunity to speak with the top 40 or 50 leaders of this program. Many of them I had not met at all. And the night before I was to meet with them, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say. So I had one of those gut check moments that's like, okay, dude, are you really the leader you think you are? And all these years, you've wanted this opportunity to lead in a way that could be different, empower, inspire people. Now is your chance. So are you going to get up there and just kind of talk the talk? Are you really going to dig in and tell them and share with them your expectations of them? But much more importantly, this team's expectations of me is what I wanted to communicate. So midnight turned into 1 a.m. and suddenly around 2 a.m., I had something that I felt like I could share with this team. And Miguel, I can tell you with all honesty, with no pre-planning, there was no agenda or even notion of what was going to come out that came out. And what came out was 10 sentences. And each of those sentences started with the word we. And I'm not that creative, so I know I have 10 sentences. They each start with we. I have the 10 we's. So the next morning, I presented these principles, and I coined them the next morning, the guiding principles that would govern how we treat each other first, because I feel like it's very, very important. And second, those we serve externally, our clients. So I got on stage, walked through these principles, and I have to tell you, of the 40 or 50 people, most were not sold. There were a handful that seemed very optimistic. And in fact, I later learned one gentleman in the audience went straight to Google to see if I had stolen those principles and if I was plagiarizing them. I love telling that story. And he knows I still tell that story. Yeah. So I shared the principles the next day. They didn't go over poorly, but they were not, they weren't received wildly. But over time, without any urging of me, the 10 We's became the cultural ethos, if you will, for this organization. So much so that they kicked off the 10 We Awards. Twice a year, they'll nominate folks who, if you're observed or caught, for lack of a better term, expressing or living one of those We's or embracing one of the We's, you can be nominated and receive an award for that. Their employee evaluations all revolve around the We's. So these guiding principles are something that over time have become the actual cornerstone of how they operate. So much so that several years later, just a matter of maybe 3 months ago, I was asked to come back and deliver a keynote kind of update or refresher on the 10 We's, which tells me that they are still very, very much in practice there. I have to be very, very honest. The first several months that I started to see the traction kind of get momentum, I felt like I was really concerned that there was a sense of kind of, let's please the boss, let's pander to the boss. And I would say that. I said, guys, if this doesn't work for you, it doesn't matter to me, because I'm going to continue to treat you this way. I hope you treat me this way, but I'm definitely going to treat you this way. And they won me over time. I learned that they actually resonate, and they are in practice today, because what ultimately happens with these principles is they turned into kind of a cultural currency. And that currency has the same value for everyone on the team, whether it's the newest intern to the most seasoned person, the most seasoned veteran. We all have the same ability to voice our opinions, be heard, and do our best work.
Yeah, and I love, Kyle, that when you presented those 10 We's the next day, you did it in black and white, just because it was a very clear and concise message.
It's true.
Kyle, you mentioned leaders and bosses, and I love the way you explain in the book that not every boss is a leader. How does that really interact with the 10 We's and the principles that you've developed?
Yeah, great question, Miguel. So I would tell you my experiences with bosses is ultimately what compelled me, among a few other things, to write the book, because a boss is nowhere near in the same sphere as what I would coin a leader or characterize as a leader. Bosses are really good at enforcing policies. They're really good at playing gotcha, pointing out where you've fallen short. A leader is obviously responsible for a lot of the same activity, the coaching, the counseling, some of the uglier things that come with being a leader, disciplinary type things. But where a leader separates him or herself from a boss is they care, they inspire, they empower, but most of all, they put the needs of others in front of their own. And that's a hard concept for many to grasp, because, we're raised in this society or this culture where, iPhone, iPad, everything that we do is me, my, and I focused. So stepping into the workforce, it's not natural for people to transition from that paradigm into being more we focused. But I'll tell you, man, the output of introducing the 10 We's had so many wonderful effects on me professionally and personally. But one that just still is resonates so loud for me or with me is that the 10 We's were and continue to be kind of the way that I operate in both my personal life as well as my professional life, holding true to these principles. And that's where a boss also stumbles is, they might walk the walk for a day, talk the talk for another day, but there's no consistency in those actions. They've got to be, a boss is someone that will react and hold someone accountable and play gotcha, but they do it in an inconsistent way. And I think it's really critical for a leader to understand when they take on the role of leading people, you are far removed from any equation that matters. You are secondary to the well-being and the success of that team. Because by the way, if the team is well, performs well, delivers great results, it's only natural you as the leader will benefit from that as well.
Yeah, and Kyle, one of the things that resonated with me was the specifics around leaders and bosses, but the question that came out of it for me was, if I'm sitting here listening to this today, how do I know if I'm a leader or a boss? And how do I know that I'm doing the right things? And actually, maybe I came up with it. I thought, is there such a thing as a cultural KPI? If you look at number 10 on your list, right? I obsess all the time over the details, and I'm very much into looking at the data.
Yeah.
How do I know? I mean, what really does it take for me to understand if I'm doing the right things?
It's very simple.
Yeah.
It's very, very simple. You just have to ask. You just have to ask. Now, there are folks that might be on the team that will not respond honestly, but for fear of retribution. If you've ruled with an iron fist and you've proven yourself to be unapproachable, asking that question is going to be met with exactly what you want to hear, that you're a great leader. So there are methods to get after those answers without really alienating the people on the team that you ask. And that could be anonymous surveys. One thing that I'm very, very big on and I've done for years in my career, even before the 10 W's, over time, they shifted a bit, and that's a 360-degree anonymous feedback engine. So where my team is given a series of questions asking me if, they're proud that the example that I set, do they feel like they're valued by me as a team member? A series of questions that really get after the heart of what you're asking. Those have been the most transformative experiences for me in terms of kind of realizing where my opportunities are. Now, occasionally I would get feedback that I just didn't agree with. I just felt like this is not true. I think this is someone with an axe to grind. I still took it very seriously because it's their perception of me. So it's really important to hear that and change and at least notice my behavior and how I might be contributing to that feeling or not. So that's, I think that's the easiest way, Miguel, is to just ask the question. Now, when you talk about can you quantify it culturally? Yes, the answer is yes. And your performance evaluations for the team, those on the team that you deliver for them on their behalf, kind of rating or judging their performance on an annual or shorter basis, also can be driven and quantified by a similar approach. So, for example, the organization I mentioned a moment ago, they use the 10 We's as part of their performance evaluation. So if you pick any one We, and for example, we own our mistakes. If I'm conducting your personnel evaluation, Miguel, I go through the 10 We's and did Miguel own a mistake this year? Did Miguel point out something that, maybe put him in a negative light, but we also improved because of his openness and his willingness to share? So if you align around principles and assign those within the performance evaluation, it is easy to quantify.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting, Kyle. You mentioned what's the phrase you said? Beating your employee. I forget the exact phrase you mentioned. It reminded me of, there's actually a famous T-shirt that says the beatings will continue until the morale
improves. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think so many companies, that's really the way that they're measured today and that they're driven today. It's just
well, we've gotten to this place now. I feel like, especially with the pandemic and the impact that had on so many of us as it relates to our work environment. We've gotten to this point now where I think organizations, and I don't even like using that term organizations, because organizations are nothing more than a bunch of people. And the leaders of those organizations are responsible for setting, establishing, and maintaining the culture. But we've gotten to this point where many, many leaders are so focused on results, and they may attain those results for a short period of time, but I'm here to tell you it's not sustainable if it's done at the expense of the team. On the contrary, the flip side of that, those leaders that have an overt emphasis on their team's development, their team's well-being, their team's job satisfaction, their fulfillment, the passion for the work that they deliver, the results take care of themselves every single time. And if not, you're at least positioned to deliver success, whatever that criteria might mean for you and your organization, than you were if you had the I or me focus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would just tell you that it's a sign of the times, but it's exacerbated because in a post-pandemic life, I think leaders are struggling with how to behave, how to meet their employees or their team members on their terms, which is a foreign concept for many, because as you know, for many, many years, if not centuries, the employee was always forced to conform to or meet the employer on the employer's level. Well, those days are gone. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's representative of the number of options and choices that the workforce has today, allowing them to go different places, do different things. And I mean, let's face it, there are jobs today that didn't even exist 6 months ago, a year ago, and beyond. So, that shift of the employer having the employees kind of mold to their needs, I think those days are long gone. And the opposite is where we are today. The employer's got to be cognizant of the employees' needs and meet them on their terms.
Yeah. Love it.
Now, you mentioned siloed organizations, and when we look at dealing with some of our clients, we're very focused on that functional area for customer experience. Is it possible to have an organization that maybe has a bifurcated culture, and can that ultimately be successful, where maybe the customer experience organization is really focused, they got your book, they're really focused on developing this great culture, but the company itself is still on a very different level? Maybe said differently, is a true cultural transformation possible if not all parts of the organization are bought in?
And that's a great question. I would say it depends. And I don't mean to cop out, but if there are different parts of the organization, let's just pick two functional areas within a company. And one team of that functional area is very high performing. They have a really strong culture. They're in an environment where people feel safe to voice their opinions. They're picked up if they stumble. And then alongside that, there's another kind of functional area that's a little bit more toxic or a lot more toxic. I think those can coexist as long as their paths never cross. And by that, I mean, if I'm a member of the toxic team and I look down the hall or across the aisle or, on a different floor, I know that there's this high performing team with a culture that really attracts people to them, and they are kind of a magnet inside the organization. Well, it stands to reason I'm not going to stand or sit in this toxic environment much longer if there's opportunities over here. So you might say, well, the high performing organization is capped. They don't have openings. So the low performing part of the organization is just kind of stuck. No, there are other organizations, they can leave the company. So I think if they are completely siloed, which is, by the way, I'm not encouraging or advocating for this setup, but you ask the question, can they coexist? And I think they can, unless they are within the same kind of sphere and people interact with one another. But that is, and even if they can coexist, Miguel, I'm convinced that is not sustainable. It's not a long-term recipe for success, because I think one of the biggest opportunities or failure points rather is, and we've all been in this scenario. Picture yourself on a team of 10 other or 9 other high-performing individuals. And one of those, there's a team of, let's call it a team of 10, right? There's you, 8 other high-performing individuals, and one person that's kind of the boat anchor bringing everybody down. If the leader does not react to that one person, he or she has now endorsed that behavior, right? So if within the organization or within the team, we have 90% of our team is performing well, but the 10% is not being addressed. And so likewise, on a broader scale, that can happen. You have a team that's performing well, another team that's not performing well. Collectively, the team is not performing well when we put those groups together. So someone sitting above that needs to recognize, and the ultimate leader of those two groups needs to recognize that there's a disparity here, and we've got to treat things more evenly.
Yeah, and that's a big question we see in a lot of our clients is there tends to be that disparity between departments, and one department maybe is very focused on driving and doing the right things and actually leading by example, where others may not. And I agree. I think it really needs to move up to that next level where that boss in some cases may need to really become a leader. Just following up on kind of a thought, I really love the line in the book where you talk about sending the sacred cows out to pasture.
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of the whole cow pathing theory, right? People just continue to do things because that's the way they've always done them.
Right.
And, the cows will continue to go down the path that was there for many years because it's what they know and what they've seen in the past, even though there might be an easier way for that cow to get from one place to the water.
Yep.
How do you see that in organizations, and kind of what could a leader do in some sense to really help sort of drive better practices in that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me after doing a ton of research to write the book, in addition to my years in corporate America, that sacred cows and the status quo are as prevalent as they are. Think about this. If you're in an environment where every time you stick your hand up because you've got a great idea or the next whiz bang innovation, but nobody listens, your boss doesn't embrace your provocative thinking, you're only going to do that for a few times. You're not going to continue to raise your hand if nobody's listening. You're not going to continue to put yourself out there, or worse, you put yourself out there, you make a mistake with this innovative approach to something, and you get your wrist slapped, or worse, terminated. So and by the way, I feel like this is a much bigger issue the bigger the organization, because there is safety in silence. You are much safer in big organizations just keeping your head down, doing the bare minimum, AKA the status quo, and keep the radar off of you. I'm convinced most of us in corporate America, and I was there for a long time, and I admit I subscribe to the same theory, like there is safety in silence. Why would I stick my neck out if it's going to be responded with negativity, retribution, or some kind of adverse impact to my ability to earn money? So the sacred cows end up proliferating all over the organization. And what that results in on a macro level is stale, lather, rinse, repeat, pick any adjective or cliche that you like, but you are far from on the innovative cusp of something really, really special. Now, some would argue that, the bigger the organization, obviously, it's likely it stands to reason that they're very successful if they reach, enormous sizes. But at what cost? And what are they bypassing or foregoing in a culture that doesn't allow people that are closest to the action to nominate ideas, to bring innovations to bear, to take risks? And it's that boss culture that prevents those sacred cows from going out to pasture, because that boss, as we talked about a moment ago, is so keen to find the first time somebody makes a mistake, write them up, put them on some type of disciplinary action. Where's the incentive to be great when I'm gonna be beaten over the head if I stumble? So the solution is quite simple in my mind. You've got to, it's simple in theory, it's difficult to execute. And that is creating a culture or an environment where everyone's voice is heard. And if they come with a good solution, we acknowledge that Miguel brought this great solution. We share it wide, because that encourages other people to do the same thing. Likewise, and almost as equally as important, when someone brings an idea that we're not going to pursue for whatever the reason might be, is communicating to that person directly why we're not following that recommendation, but please keep those good ideas coming. And we share more broadly that, this is being considered. We opted not to travel down this path because of X, Y, Z. And the most important word in that sentence is why. Like, why are we not going forward with the plan or the thought or the approach that you surfaced? Because that why matters a whole heck of a lot. I found that people are much more accepting of negative news or a no if they understand the why behind it. So until someone breaks that cycle and allows a team to fail, or a person on the team or people on the team to fail because they were trying something new or being innovative, there's just no incentive to do anything other.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm a strong believer in developing mentors in organizations, and I had a great mentor, which you both know for many, many years. And he used to always say, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got.
You've always gotten. That's right.
And I thought he came up with it, and a few years ago I looked it up, and it was actually Henry Ford.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
The concept and the idea of people just doing the same thing over and over and getting the same result is one that is pretty much out there for many years. And then I think Jack Welch also coined the term "not invented here."
Yeah.
And if it wasn't something that GE did, they never took ideas from the outside, and it was just a very closed environment to any outside ideas or concepts.
Well, and what a soul-sucking existence, right? If every single day I've got to get up, go to the office, or log on to a Zoom call, whatever your personal scenario is, to know that I am afforded the opportunity to do right up to where I can get super creative and bring new solutions and innovative opportunities for us to do things differently. But I know if I bring it up, I'm going to be an outcast. And that's why, Miguel, we haven't walked through any of the principles. I think we touched on a couple, but my favorite of all the principles is we challenge each other. And I think it's absolutely critical for the organization or for a leader to set the tone that challenges are not only accepted, they're encouraged. You challenge your peers, you challenge your leader, you challenge everyone around you, because let's face it, in everything in life, well, almost, but nearly every single thing in life, the result of progress is found from overcoming one or more challenges. It's in our personal lives, it's in our spiritual lives, and it's certainly in our professional lives. But if we don't welcome those challenges, and more importantly, or just as important, the following we is number 9, that's we embrace challenge. If we don't welcome those challenges, embrace them when they come, we are denying improvement opportunities. We are embracing the status quo. We are embracing those sacred cows. So it's just absolutely critical to be in an environment where people know it's okay to challenge one another. But most importantly of everything I just said, though, if the leader subscribes to this philosophy, he or she better be prepared to deal with those challenges, or else they're a hypocrite. And the principles are a house of cards at that point, because the team is watching you. They're watching to see if you respond in the way that you're evangelizing these principles. So as the leader, be prepared for those challenges, embrace them, and grow from them.
Yeah. And I think that goes to number 2, which is leading by example, right?
Amen.
So,
Amen.
Kyle, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that you use the word ethos throughout the book, and Alicia has to love it, given that her company is Brand Ethos. Tell us a little bit about sort of where that thought comes from, and really how the word ethos is a thread throughout the book.
Well, I mean, it's really very simple. I mean, when you think about the word ethos, it's literally the characteristic spirit of a culture by definition. Like, I didn't make it up. So when we talk about culture, I always attach the word ethos to some type of descriptor or adjective to talk about that how you should or could view a culture, whether good or bad. So, frankly, it's just a different slant on the same word culture. I get asked a lot. I've been doing a ton of podcasts, Kyle, how do you find culture? And I would say it's the environment in which we operate. Similarly, ethos, it's the environment in which we operate, but it's the characteristic of that environment as well.
Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. This is awesome. I really tried to come up with one of my favorite, and it's difficult. I mean, I'm a real strong believer in your 10 principles. It's something I've tried to do my entire career. I just never sat down and really was able to put them together like this. And it's just, it's a great tool, I think, for any developing leader, any developing organization, or even mature organizations that tend to find themselves in a place where culture is one of the challenges that they face every day.
Miguel, I need to react to one thing you just said, and it's really very powerful, is you have thought about principles similar to these, but not necessarily packaged them in a way and said, I'm going to subscribe to these on a daily basis or whatever the right period of time is. And that's the beauty of aligning around principles. I'm not naive, and I'll be the first to admit, if you take any one of my principles and look at them in isolation, it's kind of like, of course, we're going to lead by example. Every great leader leads by, of course, we're going to do the right thing. But when you combine them and put them into a package, for lack of a better term, and align the organization around those principles, they begin to fuel the organization. The point here is to be very, very overt around the principles to which we will subscribe. Similar to the ethos conversation, I'm going to nerd out for just 1 second. By definition, a principle is a foundational belief. It's something that we hold to be true. Mission statements are great. Values, any of those kind of corporate buzzwords or lingo, they're all great. But rarely do they connect the employee to the work that they deliver on a daily basis. They're usually these nebular grand statements that especially to an entry level employee, but throughout the organization, more tragically, is that mission statement doesn't speak to me or compel me to behave in a way that delivers excellence. But if the team aligns itself around principles, very simple principles, when you're faced with adversity, when you're trying to grow the team, when you're trying to transform a team or a culture or an entire organization for that matter, you've got these principles that are foundational beliefs that we subscribe to, and we lean against these every single day. And we're not inconspicuous about it. We're very, very conspicuous about it. One of my favorite examples is, again, using the same we as this example, is we challenge each other. When the 10 we's became more of our daily nomenclature in that organization that I mentioned, a day would not go by, this is no exaggeration, where I wouldn't hear a colleague ask another colleague a question, but they always prefaced it when it was going to be a challenge. They would say, Miguel, hey, listen, man, we challenge each other, right? And naturally, the person on the receiving end of that challenge, you can almost see their shoulders drop a little bit. They become more at ease versus, Miguel, why did you deliver poor performance yesterday? Or why were your reports late yesterday? But if I preface it with a challenge, like, oh, wait, something just triggered my brain. This is the foundational belief that I've subscribed to. This is how the team conducts itself. I need to embrace this challenge. And thus, you've created an environment for open dialogue for others to challenge one another.
That's amazing.
It's safe. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it's safe. It feels safe.
That's right.
You're not attacking. You're on the same team, and I think your response, it's like the compliment sandwich, right? When you're coaching someone, I call it a compliment sandwich.
Right.
Is that they lean in, a little bit. I think it's brilliant, and I think these guiding principles. I felt the same way. Miguel actually and we had lunch yesterday and talked about it, and it's just a playbook that people can use. And it's just a great way. I worked for Wayne Huizinga as my first job, and we had our guiding principles, and it just without fail. And I think that was the success. If you're familiar with Wayne Huizinga and his businesses, was why we were able to grow so quickly and massively. And I think, I think you're onto something. So Miguel, sorry, I'll turn it back to you. I just wanted to add that the yard people were here, which is why I was on mute most of the time.
So Kyle, as we discussed prior to jumping on the call, we typically end these sessions with a favorite restaurant in your travels around the world, but I'm going to throw a twist at you. Was there one in Lawrence, Kansas that you like?
I have to admit, when I travel on business, I'm not very creative or adventurous. So I was probably at a Courtyard, and the Courtyards typically have a pretty good little section. The bistro, is that what they call it?
Yeah, they do a good job with the powdered eggs too.
Where you can get a great powdered egg omelet. I cannot point to a restaurant in Lawrence, Kansas.
So globally, what's your
I'm torn between two answers, actually. One is a place called Lolita's in Boston, which is a Mexican restaurant, which is incredible. I mean, from vibe to food, atmosphere, it's a really fun experience. As an appetizer, whether you order it or not, if you're of age, they bring a chilled tequila, like slushy. It's a bowl with like slushy tequila. And then likewise, whether you order it or not, after dinner, you get cotton candy, which is always fun. And then my competing restaurant is essentially, it's a dive over in Pinellas County, the other side of the bay. It's called VIP, also a Mexican place. Don't look around. Don't look back in the kitchen. Don't look, just eat your food. Enjoy it. It'll be some of the best you've ever had. And margaritas that are probably too strong to be legal.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. Well, I will definitely add those two to my list. I have not had the chance to dine at either of the two. Once again, Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you doing the podcast, and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Great to see you both, and happy I could help out today. Good to see you.
We're excited. So where can we get your book, Kyle?
Wherever you buy books. So Begin with We, Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence is available in audiobook, ebook, hardcover, paperback, wherever you buy books. Amazon's obviously an easy option, Barnes & Noble as well. And then also you can find me on my socials at Kyle McDowell Inc. And of course, my website is kylemcdowellinc.com.
That's excellent. I encourage everybody to read it. It is a great read. It's a great playbook. And no matter if you're starting out in business or if you've been doing it a little bit, it's definitely something that that you'll get something out of. So thank you for joining us. Come back and visit, bring us a couple of new restaurant ideas when you do, and we'll add it to our collection. So thank you so much for listening in to another episode of CX on Point with Miguel Ramos. I'm Alicia Leszewski. Make it a great day.